Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webcast, Digital, a New Era in Mine Safety, hosted by Exyn Technologies. First off, I hope all of you and your families have been keeping safe during these very, very interesting times. And we'd like to thank you all for taking the time to join us on this webcast. And we hope this next hour provides to be as interesting to you as it is for us. And we'll jump right into it so we can maximize the 1 hour that we have together. And let's begin by introducing our exceptional panel of industry experts. And first, we'll start off with Anthony Downs, who's the digital leader at Vale. Anthony joined Vale in September of 2019. And before that, he was at Hatch. Prior to that, he had 15 years plus at Rio Tinto, where he's held numerous roles and various business units in the US, Canada, and Australia. And Anthony, maybe you could tell us in 1 minute or less what Vale is all about.
Thank you. I guess most people know Vale. We're an international mining company. We focus on iron ore, coal, and here in Canada, we're also focusing on nickel and copper, along with precious metals. We run a range of underground mines across Canada and also have a number of processing plants both here in Canada, China, Japan, and in Wales as well. So yeah, that's us.
Thank you, Anthony. Our second panelist is Theo Yameogo, who's the National Mining and Metals Industry co-leader at EY. He's a partner there, and Theo used to be the VP of Digital Innovation at Dundee Precious Metals, where he led the company on its digital transformation journey. Theo is also a professional engineer in Ontario, holds an MBA with distinction from Oxford, and a PhD in rock mechanics. Theo, welcome, and maybe, again, in a minute or less, you could tell us what Ernst & Young is all about.
So EY is one of the big four multinational accounting firms in the world, and we do a lot of work in business consulting, but also in audits, tax, and transaction support.
Fantastic, thank you. And certainly last but not least, we have Don Duval, CEO at NORCAT. And again, as one of Canada's foremost thinkers on innovation and the future of work and learning, Don's had many different things. He's multifaceted enterprise dedicated to advancing the dynamic and evolving needs of the new world. NORCAT is a very, very interesting thing, and perhaps, Don, you could have 1 minute and 15 seconds because the very, very diverse things that you guys do to tell us what NORCAT is all about.
That's quite the preamble. That NORCAT is an interesting thing. I'll build on that if I could. Yeah, so you're not wrong. NORCAT's been in business for about 25 years. We're headquartered in Sudbury, Ontario, but we have 6 locations, 5 in Canada, 1 in Latin America. And our focus really is twofold as it pertains to the panel. One, we pride ourselves as being a global leader in skilled labor training and development for the mining industry. And concurrent to that, we also serve as I'll call it a mining-centric innovation center, working with tech companies, be they big or small, domestic, international, that are looking to bring emerging technologies to the mining industry that are arguably poised to transform the industry, be it on productivity or safety. Underpinning both of those, which is quite unique, NORCAT is the only skilled labor training center as well as innovation center in the world that actually owns and operates an underground mine. And I use the term ownership loosely in that it's a long-term lease of a dormant mine operated by Glencore, but we use that as a referenceable operating facility, underground mine, to enable hands-on training, but also as a place to enable tech companies to develop, test, and demonstrate technologies they're looking to bring to market. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. And as somebody who's actually done some work at NORCAT, everything he said is true. It's a fantastic place and really, really beneficial to test the product out. For everybody who doesn't know me, my name is Raffi Jabrayan. I'll be your host this afternoon. I've been in the mining industry for about 10 years or so, most of it which was with Dundee Precious Metals in various roles in Europe, Africa, and here in Toronto. I joined Exyn Technologies about a year ago when it sort of became evident that they had a solution which was going to revolutionize the mining industry. And I head up the mining practice for Exyn Technologies. And for those who aren't aware, Exyn provides a fully autonomous drone solution that specializes in gathering data in impossible places. And of course, we have clients worldwide in mining, government, nuclear, construction, etc. But what we're going to focus on today is going to be safety, digital innovation, and I would like to mention that we will definitely have a Q&A period at the end of the webcast. However, if you have any questions during the webinar for any of our panelists, feel free to type it into the chat box and we will do our best to get those answered. If it's just a general question for the panelists, just type it in there. If it's specifically to one of the people on there, please put their name. And for those of you who are watching this at a later time, the recorded one, if you have any questions, again, please feel free to email it to us and we will get a reply to you in short order. And with that out of the way, let's get down to business. We know that sometimes the mining industry has a reputation of being unsafe and dangerous, and this is warranted. I mean, there are times when that's the case when we're working near open stopes or around heavy machinery in tight places that could potentially be hazardous, which is generally why it shows up on a lot of different risk assessments. So what we're going to talk about today is how digital innovation is playing a huge role in taking that away and making it much safer in the underground. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, which is one of the key reasons that I joined Exyn. And there have been tremendous advances in technology and some fantastic new products on services on the market. We've seen more and more mining companies leverage these new technologies to enhance their safety policies and procedures and ensures that the miners get home safe each and every day, which I think every mining company will tell you is probably the most important thing with any mine. And one of those companies that we at Exyn have seen firsthand take these measures is Vale, with their tagline of obsession with safety. And I guess with that being said, we'll ask our first question to Anthony. Anthony, I know there are numerous safety initiatives at Vale at any given time, but can you tell us what role does digital innovation play in safety at Vale?
Sure. So at Vale, life matters most. So it's a key priority in all that we do. To the point that we pivoted our digital program last year. So initially, our digital program was focused on safety, but also on productivity, also on cost reductions. But we had a rethink last year, and we pivoted it to be solely focused on personal and process safety. So what that means is that we're actively looking for ways that we can use technology to get workers out of harm's way, but also, telemetry and other systems so that we are more situationally aware around the emerging risky situations so that we can take steps to address those. So things like using autonomous equipment for inspections, next generation instrumentation, and a lot of AI and data analytics goes into that basket as well.
Fantastic. And would you say that's generally been well received by the workforce? Is there lots of buy-in from the workforce on that?
Yeah, so as you said, the work we do has a level of inherent risk in it, and it's really important that we take whatever steps we can to reduce or remove that risk. And certainly digital innovation is a key enabler to doing that. And we've got a philosophy that if we have safe processes that are stable and well understood in regard to situational awareness, then we're naturally going to have a productive operation. We're naturally going to have a cost focus and low cost to produce operation as an outcome of being focused on personal and process safety. So the business understands that and definitely is accepting of it.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you. Maybe the next question, we'll put it out to all the panelists. And Theo, we'll kick it off with you first, but then we'll definitely open up to Don and Anthony as well. Most of you guys have worked at many different mines or operations around the world, and you guys have seen many different things. Theo, what are some of the coolest technologies you've seen that are changing the landscape of health and safety in the mining industry?
So I think, Raffi, I think that the fundamental aspect of the arms way that we have in underground situation is really to avoid that people get into unsafe ground conditions, for example. So some of the early detection for like rock mechanics and ground control, which is actually the last job I did do before I left the industry for consulting, is actually revolutionary because we have early detections for ground movement and early detection for seismicity and things like that. But with digital, we're seeing that those technologies are getting closer to the equipment or to the worker. So what I've seen is that more equipment are actually unable to be an extra help to the worker. And sometimes it's even the worker's gear that is unable by technology to make the worker somewhat of a super aware, or like Rick has like to call it hyper awareness when they're underground, so that they can see things coming and avoid being. And finally, the one that I know that, you know, which is one of the reasons I came across Exyn, is really those robotic drones. Because underground, not every situation will have what I call an infrastructure to support digital. That's usually some of the problems. So we didn't have the infrastructure sitting on the equipment or the worker carrying the infrastructure so that digital can operate. And to me, one of the major changes in underground environment in the future is this ability of self-driven robotic tools and items that do not require the mining company or the mine to change everything in the infrastructure to make it work. So that's what
fantastic. Thank you for that. And Don, we'll ask the same question there to you. And you can bear in mind that the world's first fully autonomous drone flew in your mine in Sudbury. So congratulations for that. But maybe you can tell us about some of the most interesting technologies that you've seen that are changing the landscape of safety.
Yeah, you know, the way I would look at it, and I think your comment kind of segues to this, that a lot of the emerging technologies that we've seen are rooted in kind of primary engagement, where they come to the underground center, and we kind of have that unique perch as a firsthand perspective to see them. You know, some of the more interesting ones, obviously, you know, building on Theo's comment, this migration towards you know, tele-remote autonomous vehicle systems to enable the worker to be removed from any high risk situation. We've seen some pretty significant investments in those platforms, be they original OEM installation or aftermarket installation, operating on Wi-Fi, on LTE, now 5G. You know, that is going to be a transformative, you know, technology that will continue to be deployed. But some things that may be unconventional that you know, the audience probably hasn't seen, you know, specifically with a company called Therotech. They're the global leader in equipment simulators. So if you have a new workforce learning to use an LHD, you can put them in a simulator environment to learn how to operate that. And Therotech is the global leader in manufacturing and distributing those. But from a safety perspective, what I find fascinating is where they're going, where they can equip essentially a sensor to gather data of the actual operator on the actual piece of equipment, gathering a series of data points on the operational effectiveness of that worker operating the equipment in the underground environment. And then that data is fed back automatically to the simulator to customize a training program dealing with the problem areas that actual worker is demonstrating in the field. So you can envision that for recruiting, preparation, ongoing training and development. That's very specialized in terms of how that will improve not only productivity, but safety. And then one really interesting, wacky one I thought I would share with the group, a venture-backed company called HydroStore, which essentially does compressed air storage. Historically have done it with large bladders where they'll put at the bottom of a lake, and during off-peak time, they'll essentially pump air, have a turbine, fill it full of air so it expands like a giant balloon. And then when there's peak demand, they just kind of reverse the turbine and the pressure of the water squeezes the air out and generates the other way. But HydroStore is now doing this in Australia with dormant underground mines, using it as a compressed air storage to essentially cool the air, keep it underground, and then when there's peak demand, repurposing the air, essentially turning the turbine around and letting it kind of expand and heat up and generate electricity to meet peak demand. So the benefit there from a health and safety is, from an environmental, energy conservation, using an underground mine as a giant battery, I thought was an interesting repurposing of a dormant facility. Anyhow, I have tons of these.
I'm sure you do, but those are quite interesting. Thanks for that, Don. And Anthony, same question to you.
Yeah, I'd agree with both of the other panelists. I think semi-autonomous, autonomous kit where we can either have the equipment operate itself or operate it from the surface, get people out of those risky situations is pretty cool technology. But I think the kind of game changer for us was the move from trying to roll out Wi-Fi underground to rolling out an LTE network. The LTE network has really become the lifeline for us to do a whole range of different things underground. So whether it's enabling that autonomous and semi-autonomous equipment or enabling smart IoT sensors, or whether it's around worker and equipment tracking so that we know where they are. If we need to evacuate a part of the mine, we know who's safely in the shelters versus who we need to go and look for. All that wouldn't be possible unless we had that LTE network in place. So that's pretty cool. And the opportunities of upgrading that LTE network to 5G just opens up another whole raft of opportunities on top of that again.
Yeah, definitely agree with you on that one. I mean, LTE is going to open up a whole new world for us underground, and again with the 5G as well. Thank you for that. And again,
I'd like to add something, Raffi, about this, because in some of the CIM talks that I've had recently, it looks simple, but because it's invisible, most people don't realize how important the infrastructure and the network are. Imagine that you buy like I don't know, one of these very advanced TVs that are HD TV or Ultra HD, but the signal coming to you is not the right signal because you happen not to be in the right network. It doesn't matter how good your toy is because you operate in a place that doesn't have it. It's like having a very great smartphone, but in an area that does have no tower. And because our society, the networking is not very visible, like it's happening, but it's not something we see. We tend to misunderstand the value of figuring out, okay, I need to create a network where all these toys and devices can talk to each other. And it's a good point that infrastructure and network is critical.
Yeah, the network is key.
Yeah, great points. And folks, we have over looks like 80 people in here. So again, if any of you have questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to drop it into the chat box, and we will ensure that we get to you in due time. So no digital innovation discussion would be complete without the mention of robots. And again, I'll be quite honest with you, before I joined Exyn Technologies, I didn't know too much about them. Now I'm almost well-versed in robots, and we see that the difference that it's making in the mining industry. But also, more and more, it's becoming a part of our daily lives. And I don't see that trend slowing down, especially with what's happening in the world right now and the social distancing. If we work with a robot, I don't think that counts, or that is social distancing. Don, as you head up NORCAT, and I know you see some cutting edge technology, and most of the time before it even hits the market, my question to you is, what impact do you think robots will have on the future of mining?
Well, to preface this, that the term robot is kind of all-encompassing, so I'll just kind of lay that as a foundation. But I'll build on Theo's comment because it's an interesting segue where I would absolutely agree that there are a lot of mining companies or mining tech companies that do get inspired and encouraged by an array of technologies, but the integration and adoption and deployment of in their businesses is something that's critical. But to address your question more specifically, what impact will robots have? Well, it's going to be transformative. There have been studies by E&Y, Deloitte, Hatch, BDO, and kind of the general consensus by 2025, 2027-ish, there's expectations that robots will replace about 50% of the mine workers, thereby also reducing mining accidents by close to 75%. So if that into itself is not transformative, then I don't know, what is. Now, there will be debate on whether or not the timeline, given my opinion on, the mining industry doesn't have an innovation problem. They have challenges around adoption. And so the timeline on which we achieve, this full integration and transformation of incorporating robots, it might not be 2025, it might not be 2027, but make no mistakes, there's increasing shareholder pressure on these mining companies, inspiring executives to be more creative than ever to invest in and deploy technologies that can enhance productivity and improve safety. It will absolutely differ in terms of implementation based on regional socioeconomic factors of where the mine operates. But make no mistake, I think it's going to be absolutely transformative to the industry.
Fantastic, thanks, Don. And Theo, same question to you.
Yeah, I mean, this is where the world is going, and typically what I say is, and 100% we've done on the adoption conundrum. It's more of an adoption form because most of the time the mining worker has those technologies or somewhat of those commercialized consumer technologies at home, and at some point they're going to ask themselves the question, why am I not doing that at work? And this is where we have to think about it. I mean, we have a lot of places, for example, where we're still using manual work for even mopping the floor, and yet we're seeing more and more robots in people's houses that are doing some of the work. We're automating so many things in our lives at home that we should expect the same in the sectors. And if you look at other industries where the margins are really thin, they go on it very fast. Now, there's a question about the robot replacing the human, but there's also the optimist and positive thinking about the robot enhancing the human. And usually we don't see that very quickly, but actually robots can enhance the human in a way that makes our lives much easier. So if you think about underground, and let's say I work in mine rescue. Typically, we know how mine rescue works today, but what if mine rescue had robots that actually are still going underground, and the mine rescue team is monitoring the robots from surface? We would have achieved the same mine rescue job, but without the mine rescue team going into adverse conditions. And this is how I see the robots helping the mining sector. Mining is very complex, but if we break it down into areas, we can slowly see, oh yeah, that makes more sense to have 8 mine rescue guys sitting on surface monitoring robots and then going everywhere maybe at the same time. And it'll be fine to burn a robot. I mean, you can take a robot to walk through the fire underground if you have to. And if it doesn't make it to the other side, well, that's okay. But you can't take a human to do that. You can't get the human that close to the fire. So these are the kind of things that I see in health and safety that we should start thinking about.
Perfect, thank you. And we actually have a couple of questions from our viewers now. The first one comes in from Haran Tinder at USC Consulting, and it's for anybody on the panel. And the question is, how are you seeing companies approach the transformation to more autonomous equipment and less equipment operators with its employees? Anthony, did you want to maybe take that one?
Yeah, I might take that one. So we've got a lot of old mines. A number of our mines are more than 100 years old. And as we go deeper and deeper into those mines, we face a number of challenges. One is the long travel time it takes to get people from the surface down to the face to undertake the mining. And then we're also seeing more and more seismic activity as we get deeper and deeper. And so there's going to be a point where for some of our deep mines, it's not going to be safe to continue to mine them with humans underground on a day-by-day basis. And so that will leave us with a decision. Do we close and walk away from that mine and leave ore in the ground, or do we use robots and autonomous and semi-autonomous equipment to continue to mine that metal? And what we're finding is, as we're doing that, we're transitioning the operator from being on the equipment underground to being on the surface, either operating the equipment or supervising a number of pieces of equipment that are operating down there. So we're seeing, an opportunity to continue to keep investing in the community to continue to produce really important metal, rather than walking away from it because the risk-reward ratio doesn't work out when people are underground in those situations. So the workforce understands that and is pretty accepting that they can still do their job, but they're doing their job in a safe office on the surface rather than being kilometers and kilometers underground.
Yeah, that's a very interesting take on it, and I totally agree with that. Don, Theo, any thoughts on that?
The only thing I can add, and again, keep in mind these comments are rooted on kind of primary anecdotal insight that we get with tech companies coming into our facility, as well as kind of gleaning the questions that mining executives, when they come to our facility, what they're thinking about. And in some respects, I think I have a strong opinion now, but it's still being formulated. But the differentiation between teleremote and autonomous, there's a lot of discussions that are happening now that teleremote is a stepping stone. It will soon be replaced by almost exclusively autonomous systems. And you can look at a company, Hardline, RCT. They're quite sophisticated both in teleremote, autonomous. But a lot of the questions that are even coming now from mining companies are asking the part that requires the hands-on operator on surface operating, the bucket at the scoop at the face, then moving the vehicle back and then running it autonomously. How close are we to having an intelligent, fully autonomous system that will actually operate the bucket and do all of that component? So the trend line is looking to use teleremote maybe as a stepping stone. And if you look at other really sophisticated emerging technologies such as Forte, distributed via Shift, a startup tech company headquartered here, the notion of going to fully autonomous is really rooted in their value proposition that can move inventory, almost like an Amazon warehouse-like distribution model. It can actually move inventory in a container down a mine drift fully autonomously. So there's no supplementary resource that necessarily has to control it from surface. So what we're seeing from a trend line is, to the question that came in, is that you're seeing a lot of investment and exploration on how do you remove even the teleremote component of that equation.
Excellent, thank you. And the questions are coming in hot and heavy, and I will put a few aside. We're going to switch gears here and talk a little bit about the financial aspect of it. And of course, we figure since EY loves crunching numbers, maybe we'll start talking to Theo with this because it's a natural fit. And this does tie into some of the questions that are actually coming in from our viewers as well. But the question that we have, and Theo, we know that there are a lot of intangibles and not everything that you do is easily quantifiable with dollars and cents when kicking off a new project. However, how would you assess the ROI of implementing a digital innovation program? What are some of the markers you look for, and what are the things that you would measure?
For mining in general, the natural tendency is to go after cost reduction. That's a natural tendency. So clients will say, well, if I install this, what cost am I taking out? But when it comes to health and safety, though, it's really hard to come up with an ROI when there's lives in danger. So typically, if you go by the traditional business cases of doing something new, you know, the CFOs of this world will tell you that, well, our weighted average cost of capital is this number. So if we're going to invest capital, so you need to bid this number plus something. But what is changing with digital is that we have seen around the world that with digital, some of the things are more of it's more of a beginning, and it creates an unintended set of consequences that can actually benefit the company, and you don't know those consequences. So you can always. So when I was at Dundee, what we always did was to just do the ROI on the initial benefit. That's how I called it, because there's some sort of a network of benefits that you can't see right away. Give an example. When we did virtual reality training for people to operate like a very complicated environment where there's some sort of lava level material, we did not really know that this will actually drive all our training department in the smelter to change the way they approach things, and just started saying, you know what, we're going to stop in-room training, we're going to do all virtual. And by the way, virtual, we can track what the people are good at before they get in there. So that's one health and safety aspect that, you know, you just discover, okay, there's more things I can do. With the robotic automated drone, you know, the initial idea was to just map some stopes, but then suddenly it became like, oh, we can use it to actually map new areas of the mine where we haven't been in. And it was just a test. So this ROI basically keep moving, and then you end up creating more benefits. Now, if the project, you can create tighter milestones so that you can get rid of projects that are not working out in your current environment. And that's really what's critical, is actually how to let go of things more than the ROI, because usually the ROI, you know, mining adopts late anyway. So by the time we're adopting, we already know that elsewhere it has to work. It's a question of, does it work in our environment? So that's well said.
Perfect. And I think that also answers one of the questions we had from one of our viewers, Walter Ferrick from Dundee Precious Metals. And the question was, as a finance guy, how does digital innovation impact productivity and the bottom line? This is open to all panelists as well. So if somebody else wants to take a stab at that, please feel free.
Yeah, I might jump in. So what we're finding, and you know, the safety initiative could be semi-autonomous, it could be autonomous, it could be smart sensoring, or like the use of drones, for example, to capture data and lead to better situational awareness. Whatever the safety initiative is, we're always finding very easily other benefits to the business. So if we take the semi-autonomous, we have a shift, we load explosives, we do the shift change while we let the blast clear. Normally that would have been dormant time in our underground mine, and this is a time where we're using the autonomous equipment allows us to keep material moving, you know, 24 hours a day around the clock, rather than having those dormant periods for every shift change. It also allows, even during a shift, for someone to come out of the crew lineup, sit in the seat and instantly start mucking and moving the material around, rather than spending 40 to 60 minutes getting in the cage and traveling to the face. We get that extra hour each and every shift. And if you take situational awareness, for example, and we're implementing on top of that, you know, short interval control, increased awareness to allow us to jump in and redirect things, mid-shift when plans aren't working out as well as they could, again, is adding incremental tons, fairly easily and consistently into our network. So there's not many safety initiatives that we have executed where there haven't been very positive consequences in productivity and cost per ton as well.
Fantastic, thank you. And we have another question, and I think because we were talking about autonomy, we can send this one to all the panelists from Nathan Siegel. Can you please talk about the solutions your companies were considering and why you chose or didn't choose the Exyn product? I wish I could answer that one, but I think I'll leave it to you guys.
Sure, I'll jump in. So the reason, so we run a lot of experiments, a lot of proof of concept, proof of technologies in the business, so that we can find the right solution to address the business problem. And what we were looking for when it came to surveying underground was how do we get the human out of harm's way? How do we increase the ability to rapidly capture data and capture high quality data? So we looked at a range of solutions. Some had the ability to fly, some were working on tracks, and a whole range of different initiatives. But we we set out our design criteria, what we were looking to meet, and undertook some business experiments to work out the best solution for us.
And I can relate to the question. So when I was at Dundee, we basically try to get the technical team to ask tough questions around things we've been doing for years one way and why we can't do it a different way. And one of the questions that came up was basically, how come we're using the CMS that was created in the 80s to still do stope mapping? And we're like, yeah, we should be able to use a drone. And then when we started scouting, we were in a period where, as most people know on the call, Dundee adopted Wi-Fi very early, all pervasive underground. So we're in the period where we were thinking, okay, do we go LTE or do we wait for 5G? This is in Bulgaria and Europe. And we didn't want something that required complicated infrastructure or network to use. And when we scouted, this is how we ended up setting out on Exyn. Beyond Exyn, it's really, Exyn is one solution in the robotics world, but for underground mining, it's really this idea of having an automated system, something that you may not even have to touch because you didn't add more work to the surveyor. Surveyors are getting more and more rare to get, like good surveyors, and in an underground environment where we, like Anthony was saying, we continue to expand the mine, we don't necessarily want to have, people driving all around the mine just taking 5 minutes to do a survey. So with our clients, typically when we have discussions around underground usage of drone technology, the question is always about, can it fly by itself? Does somebody need to babysit it? Can you avoid cables? Because underground is not a controlled environment. And how does it do with dust? How does it do with humidity? And these are items that every mining company should be checking when they pick or select a pilot. And that's the critical part, is piloting. Always pilot before you basically deploy across.
Perfect, thank you. And actually, I think this is a perfect segue because we're definitely covering the robotics angle. But let's not forget the human element and the actual people that are working in the mining industry. As we know, mining traditionally has had a little bit of an older workforce and not always been the most desirable places to work, and pulling in young people to work in our industry. Even just a few short years ago, it was unfathomable for a mining company to have a digital innovation department. Again, I worked for a mining company that opened a digital innovation department. It was groundbreaking. It was phenomenal. And that's been changing. Now there's paradigm shift in the approach, and it's like you can't not have a digital innovation company anymore. Having said that, and Anthony, I'll ask this to you. How is Vale attracting a new generation of miners, and what are some of the steps that Vale is taking to ensure that the future is bright and loaded with some of this young talent that's coming out of the schools?
Yeah, so you're right that the stereotype of an underground mine isn't very helpful in the recruitment stage to attract people to come and work for us. And we have very strong initiatives in place to attract first generation miners, to attract a more diverse workforce to come and work for us, both on the surface and underground. And the way we're tackling that is, we are actively, week by week, month by month, improving what it is like to work and be underground. And then we're taking opportunities to go out and talk to people and tell them about what the new reality is. But importantly, we're also partnering with a whole range of people. So we're partnering with various colleges, various universities. We're giving people an opportunity to actually come underground, whether it's for a visit or whether it's part of a summer internship, for example, to actually come and experience what it's really like. And then we're also exploring things with Don's team around using virtual reality, right? How do we give them a realistic experience of what it's like to be underground and to see what it's like in our facilities, so that we can start to break down some of the stereotypes and some of the understanding people have of what it was like in a coal mine in the 1800s, because in reality our world is very different to that today.
Yeah, and Don, Theo, you guys want to chime in on that?
Yeah, like in terms of a new generation of miners and Raffi, kind of extending that to a student's perspective in some respects. This, just to give everyone context, from the Canadian perspective, the Mining Industry HR Council of Canada is forecasting that the mining industry over the next 10 years is going to need somewhere between 80 to 100,000 new workers. So if you liken the demand side of the equation to be intact, well, it is. And these are relatively good paying jobs and very, controlled and safe environments. But on the supply side, if you look back over the last 15, 20 years at colleges, high schools, and universities in Canada, there has been I would say, a significant decline in students pursuing and thinking about a career in the mining industry. As a data point, we at NORCAT, amongst our various campuses, if you will, we train about 25 to 30,000 mine workers a year. So arguably a big university, but in some respects, and I've come to learn a lot of kind of some interesting observations with attracting young people to engage them in careers in mining. And Anthony hit on one of the ones that I think is one of the most important around the impression at a young age, and we even do work with elementary school kids in Timmins, Thunder Bay, and Sudbury. The impression of what mining is, even at the high school age, even when you have parents in the mining industry, it is not one that they put at the forefront of their career opportunities. They have a vision as to what mining is, and that influences them downstream. So much so, in 2017, as a really interesting example, I attended the mining career fair at the University of Toronto, and there was not a single mining company there. It was filled with service providers, be they on the engineering side, it was vendors, but there was no, series or handful of flagship mining companies taking the time to promote. And now that's changed. To Anthony's point, the outreach that Anthony and the team do at Vale to educate and inspire, I would say is probably one of the leading organizations, at least from the Canadian context, that I've seen. And it's critically important to attract this new generation of miners. But the other thing I'll dovetail on is the traditional incentives no longer exist for young prospective workers, meaning you just have to pay them enough, but paying them more isn't necessarily going to retain and engage them. You just got to take the money equation off the table. But it's no longer, they're looking for different things. And, I have a hypothesis that as it pertains to robotics and technology, mining companies that invest and deploy successfully these emerging technologies will not only win the economic productivity, safety, part of the equation, but if you look at the incentives as to what a new worker wants to do, they look at, if this is an organization that has embedded technology and I can operate an LHD using an iPad from Surface, hey, pay me less. I'm okay with that. If I could work at a coffee shop and actually do a couple of muck out a few rounds, I will actually, and we validate this by conducting surveys of our inbound trainees who take our programs. So those mining companies that invest for, again, productivity, shareholder value reasons, in new technologies to create an interesting, unique, dynamic work environment, I also believe firmly are going to win the battle for talent. And you're going to see, pretty transformative expectations over the next 5 years as to what it means to have a career in the mining industry for young workers.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you fully. And I mean, again, we've seen it firsthand, even at Exyn, the amount of young talent that we have who didn't think they'd be working in mining. So even though they are working for a robotics company, the fact that they're working underground in mining, I think, is opening up more and more doors. Theo, let's get your take on that as well.
So I don't know what else to add to what Anthony and Don already mentioned. I think it covers basically everything I can think of, really.
Excellent. So what we'll do is maybe we'll go to a rapid fire question here, open to all three of you, and then we'll take a few questions with the remaining time we have left. If we could all look into our crystal balls, and would you be able to tell me what does the future of mining in safety look like? Let's start with you, Don.
I was hoping to go last. Yeah, well, I think it's going to be rooted in earlier comments. I think, mining companies in any which way, shape, or form are looking to minimize the risk of associated with putting workers in positions where there might be risk, right? So just looking at operations, putting fewer workers in the underground context, putting fewer workers underground. You're going to see, continued investments in, autonomous systems that have user interfaces that appeal to a younger generation. For workers that do need to be underground, I think you're going to see some pretty interesting, I'll call them biometric type sensor information. And some of the things we've seen in other industries that are being tested for the mining industry right now it's mind blowing. And again, these predictive analytics tools, again, applied to the example of Theo around rock mechanics, but actually embedding that into a worker to assess depression, fatigue, anything that might inhibit their ability to make sound decisions for those that do need to continue to be put in environments where there's a high degree of risk. I think you're going to see just a groundswell of interesting technologies that are stitched together that kind of that will take hold.
Excellent. Anthony, you want to go next?
Yeah, I think the future is one where we continue to be safer and safer. With deliberate deployment of technology and mine design to get the workers out of harm's way. I think we're going to see a situation where we move from having someone sitting on a piece of equipment to supervising 4 or 5 pieces of equipment or autonomously being tasked to do various things. And I think our situational awareness will continue to grow. I think there's a huge opportunity to capture better quality data and use that data to drive both tactical and strategic decisions. So I see the future for mining being underground in particular being a lot more data driven than it is today.
Yeah, very interesting. Theo, your thoughts on that?
So in addition to what Don and Anthony mentioned, I would say that we will also see an expanding role of safety outside of just the underground and the worker. where communities are going to look for some sort of economic safety, and then there's going to be, and I actually like the way Vale basically defines safety because it's much larger. You're going to have environmental safety, and I think that the same way mining is going to be critical for the the future of the world in terms of metals that we need for economic development. The same way society will actually force mining to do more for the workers, do more for the environment, and do more for the communities.
Yeah, very well put.
Raffi, just to share an interesting anecdote, a few years back, we were doing a fair bit of work for a couple of mining companies in Saudi Arabia. And when we looked at their data as to what was driving safety-related incidents within the mining operation, and it might not come to a surprise to those in the mining realm, but they discovered that the majority of safety-related injuries, issues with their workers were actually off-site. And a lot of it rooted in those who are late for work, speeding, getting into car accidents. So they adopted an incentive model that for improved worker, and this plays more on the cultural element to it, but I think it was really interesting at the time, to incentivize workers to drive that cultural, inherent, safe, all day, every day attitude. They created a program that actually rewarded that individual's family for that worker's behavior. So when the family was made aware that, oh, we're going to get some sort of benefit if my father or mom are safe at work, I'm going to remind my father or mother every day to be safe. And it's I know the Vale locally or maybe globally had the Home Safe program, which is somewhat embedded in that concept around engaging the family. I think you're going to see more creative cultural elements and more creativity with many of these mining companies that look at safety as one of those all day everyday mentality things, and the Vale Home Safe is a great example of how they did that. I thought it was an amazing campaign that they led.
Yeah, a certain mining company I used to work for had done stop and think cards and for the employees, but then that actually started going home, and we would take the stop and think cards home to our families, and they used to fill out these things for their everyday actions and see how that played out, and you could see some of the risks that you take it home, which you wouldn't do at work. And just to touch on the question I asked you guys as to what does the future of safety in mining look like, if I was to look in my crystal ball, I think I would sum it up in probably 2 words with autonomy and efficiency. I think the more autonomous vehicles we have, the more efficient we're going to be in the fact that we're going to spend less time underground. And having our miners being underground less and being on the surface is not only going to attract a whole new generation of miners, it's going to allow us to be a little bit more efficient. And as you mentioned, Don, if you're going to pay me a few dollars less, however, I'm going to work in the safety of my office, but I could just be just as efficient and have the same quality data. I think that's going to be a huge differentiator down the road. That's all the questions that I had, but we still have a few minutes, so let's take a few more from the viewers. We have one from Ernst Ortega, and the question says, traditionally, mining companies have been slow to adapt next-gen new technologies such as cloud-native solutions. Have mining companies sped up their adoption, or are they still in exploratory, proof-of-concept type stage? And if they are adopting cloud solutions, in your opinion, which are leading the pack in the mining space? Open to the panel of whoever's comfortable with it.
So I'll quickly talk from the Vale, and then perhaps the other guys can talk about what they're seeing in the industry. We are adopting cloud. One of the challenges until recently was around diversity of network links, distance between us and wherever the cloud touchdown point happened to be. But most of the major cloud providers now have got kind of operational side capability to host some of your data and some of your cloud capability physically on-prem, and that's opening up a whole range of opportunities that we wouldn't have had in the past.
Fantastic, thank you. Gentlemen?
Okay, well, So cloud native solutions are definitely going to help down the road, but similar to what Anthony is saying, what you discover once you decide to, assess cloud or not cloud is really the actual service you're gonna get, because mines are never, well, they're rarely in the city, like in Sudbury, where they're really close, but typically they're so far away, and if they're in a different country that has different rules around cloud, then you get into complications. So the situation for mining companies around cloud is never like a black and white. It depends on where they are and who's the provider, and if the redundancy is there, if internet, Wi-Fi or fiber is good. And there's also there's a lot of solutions sometimes that don't pass the cybersecurity test, and that's another piece that most vendors need to know, is that mining companies, especially in Canada, they tend to all be listed, so they need to make sure that the cyber protected, and they can't just plug in any solution that is just cloud-based without knowing how that works. And finally, what I would say is that we have clients that will want to look at cloud, but then they have an ERP and they made a lot of customization, for example. So they need to fix a lot of things before they can go cloud. And also, if for mining, technical mining solutions, it's getting better, but I can say that 3 years ago, there was not a lot of cloud versions of all the stuff that technical guys are using, which is where mining has their wealth. It's the data to do with the life of mine, the geology, the mine plans. So I think it's more of a networking, a network effect of, okay, how many people are gonna go cloud? If I go cloud, will my mine planning solution also be cloud, or will I then have to manage, especially IT teams? I have to manage the cloud for some things, but then on all the OT, I have to be on-prem. So I don't think it's a simple solution, but I think that mining companies, at least for the corporate services, they'll probably see cloud as the next big thing.
Thanks for that, Theo. And Don, did you have any thoughts on that?
No, they've covered it off well.
Perfect. Well, again, we do have a bunch of other questions. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to get to them now. However, we will be emailing answers to all the participants. Whoever had registered, we will have a short survey, and we will definitely answer whatever questions we can. If it's for the panelists, we will email it to the panelists and get you guys written responses. Thank you, Theo. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Anthony. This was a fantastic panel. Great discussion. Seems like the hour flew by. Thank you for your time. Any parting words from the three of you?
No, appreciate the opportunity.
From Vale, if people have good ideas of how to make our operations safer, always willing to entertain a chat. So feel free to look me up.
Excellent.
Yeah, dovetailing on that, obviously, as it pertains to tech companies, the NORCAT Underground Center is the place to get that first all-important customer reference for many companies. So if you're looking for an operating mine to develop, test, or demonstrate, or something on the training and development side, happy to have that discussion as well.
And for me, like, digital transformation will happen whether people want it or not. So it's all about getting there ahead of time, or not losing the battle, but it will happen, and do what you need to do to get it done.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. Well, if just a few of these things that we've talked about from safety perspective can come through, I think we're all in good hands. Thank you to all the listeners in the audience. If you have any further questions, please feel free to email them at hello@exyntechnologies.com, and we'll ensure to get back to you. Thanks for your time, and see you soon.
Thank you, everybody.